Awesome. So, welcome everyone to this week's episode of Actual Intelligence. I'm Alejandro, and today we're diving into, I don't know if necessarily it's a protocol, it's like a code base or how you describe it, but we're here to get educated on that. But it sounds a bit obscure. It's called x402, but I do believe will become one of AI and crypto's building blocks. It's going to be the backbone of a lot of crypto. So what is x402? As far as I understand it, it's a payment protocol built for machines. Basically, we're creating what I like to call the machine economy. It's not just humans now, but it's going to be computers transacting with each other. Just a little background. It's a x402 or 402 payment required is a HTTP status code from long ago. It just lay dormant because there was no way for computers to translate. It was thought of when the internet was first coming around, which is really cool to see it now being a real thing. But I have a little bit more written here, but I think it'd be better that we just kick it off and I get a quick intro from Ved here, and he can start to walk us through a little bit. But why not just start with who you are and why you're the person to tell us about this?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the warm welcome. Nice to meet you all. My name is Ved. I was previously a product manager at Galaxy for the past 18 months, working specifically as the product lead on everything DeFi, staking, and custody. And through that role and through being in the space quite actively, I really got engaged within agentic payments in the last 3 to 6 months because it didn't really exist 3 to 6 months ago. And I was actually very fortunate enough to judge on the very first, I think, agentic payment hackathon, probably ever, but it was a YC hackathon hosted by Locus. So shout out to the guys at Locus for hosting it. Super interesting, really cutting edge builders who built a massive amount of projects, and it was super interesting to be at Y Combinator and see everyone still super interested in this intersection of AI and crypto. And yeah, I think that's the reason why I think I'd be a good person to speak on it, because I was very fortunate and very grateful to see basically a room full of 100 to 200 people just hacking away at trying to build the best x402 agentic payment tech.
Amazing, man. Amazing. No, I'm super grateful to have you here. I'm curious how you found the whole hackathon experience. Very insightful and inspiring to see all these guys in live action working on something like this. How did you find it? Was it super inspiring, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was very interesting. I think the biggest thing that I took away was the ingenuity with everyone's ideas. I think it's very easy for a very closed loop kind of product to be like, oh, I'm Beehive, for example, so I'm just going to build a newsletter from Beehive. I think the coolest thing that I've seen with x402, and one that was super amplified when I was at the hackathon, was that the ingenuity that people can create because it's such an open standard was amazing. People built all sorts of cool stuff, nonsense, like literally across the board. I think that the fabric of why x402 is so important, because I know a lot of people very often confuse it with it being a Coinbase thing and only a Coinbase ecosystem thing. But I think that's obviously when people haven't looked into it very much. And if they did, they'd very much see that a lot of what why 402 was built was so that people could have an open standard to build agentic payments throughout the ecosystem and throughout basically the world for anyone who is building an AI agent. Yeah.
Yeah, you made a really good point there about Coinbase. That's essentially when I first started hearing about. But yeah, I guess they brought it to the forefront of guys like myself who are maybe not as in tuned in the agentic payment world. And I guess like mass marketed it in a way and it really put it on the map so that everybody can get an understanding as to what it is.
Yeah. I think that's super true. And obviously, we are somewhat, at least I'm very much unbiased here in the sense that I know that obviously Coinbase do very much benefit from it because they're a facilitator and they want to see it succeed. But I think it's very important for everyone to know who's listening that it's not just beneficial for Coinbase. They created a standard so everyone basically benefits from it.
Curious, like obviously Coinbase released it, but what do they stand to gain from this exactly? And my apologies if you already went over that. It's just I completely cut out for a moment there.
I know, that's cool. It's an important one that we can dig into, I think, a little bit more in depth. But Coinbase stands to benefit from the fact that they were the main facilitator and the one who began it. And if you actually navigate to the x402 a website and click start building, they actually very heavily incentivize using the Coinbase developer wallet or the Coinbase wallet, as opposed to using a MetaMask or connector wallet. The initial prompt is use the Coinbase developer wallet. And obviously they benefit from API charges and essentially being able to have people come and use their developer APIs, which creates a flywheel around eventually having to use a Coinbase wallet or having to use a Coinbase service or having to trade on Coinbase. So yeah, it's very interesting, but I don't think I personally believe it. And from meeting the creators of Coinbase folk at the hackathon, because some of the team who actually built x402 was there, they were very intentional to say to me, like, we built this so that we could help facilitate the fast forwarding of agentic payments, as opposed to we built this so that we can increase the amount of API calls and how much we profit. Yeah.
Do you think it could actually get to a point where like you have to have a Coinbase wallet to use x402? It feels like it would be a little intense.
I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we're obviously forced to. I think I agree that would never be the case, but I do think that it's heavily incentivized. It's of course, like, they're a business at the end of the day, and I think everyone knows that it is intentionally so that they are seen to be on the cutting edge, which they are. I don't doubt that. And I think that we won't ever be forced to, but we will be heavily incentivized, and they'll make sure they create the products around it so that you actually can also want to build on Coinbase.
Yeah, of course. Now, just to rewind a little bit, notice some new people joined here, but I just want to go over the basis of what x402 is, like where it came from and why it's important. As soon as I figured this out, it opened my eyes and I was like, wow, x402 is going to change the game.
Yeah, it makes sense. Would you like me to run through it, or do you want to take it away, Alan?
Yeah. No, I think like I have the basics of it, but I'd love to hear your view on it.
Yeah, the way that I see it is essentially it's an open standard allowing anyone in the world to empower their AI agent to transact. And it's built on the foundation that we should try and make products that are not closed loop, but that are focused on ensuring a flywheel effect around them. And the way that it does it, like using the payment header and using 402 as HTTP, is just the most elegant way of doing it. But inherently, the problem that they're solving is, how do you allow agents to transact in the most efficient way possible? So I think that's really what x402 is.
What really intrigued me was the idea that this is, like I said earlier, the machine economy. This is literally the creation of the machine economy. I believe in the future, this will actually be like, this will be a really important part of finances, and well, not just decentralized finance, but also centralized finance as companies start to move onto the blockchain.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. And I think the other thing to consider is, when it comes to something like x402, we're witnessing the usage of agents just increase exponentially. And actually, in reality, what will eventually end up happening is people will move away from the standard models of like subscriptions and credits. And I think they will have an on-demand, somewhat like a trade, like where you place a swap and you're like, okay, I want this in this lifetime kind of format. It's going to be the same way you want to pay for a compute credit or you want to pay for an OpenAI API call. Why would you decide to have a metered based billing solution rather than every call you make is done live in time. And then also the best part about it is you can still have the same ad hoc deals. If you're an enterprise customer of OpenAI's, sure, you will obviously get a discount per credit, but you can now use the x402 protocol, and it's like in the documents where you can code in the discount being in there. So rather than paying $1 for a credit, you can pay 80 cents. So it's giving everyone the maximal amount of flexibility to actually be able to use agents.
So essentially, it's like a pay-per-play model that, like you just referenced there, it's way more efficient, which per transaction, it is going to be, it is substantially cheaper than the other models which we've seen previously, like the subscription models that you just referenced.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting part. That I'm sure you guys may have come across this startup because they're London-based, but it's called Page.ai, run by a really famous builder called Manny Medina. And actually what they're trying to build there is actually a different type of billing pattern, allowing actually people to bill agents based on outcomes. And rather than it being based on anything else, it's actually the outcome-based thing. And I think one thing that they will probably do at some point, which if they're not already doing in stealth, that they will implement x402 as part of their native billing usage, as opposed to it being done through wires and ACH and even real-time payments in the UK. So I think we'll see a lot more people move towards that. As you're saying, the agent and machine economy just grows and grows.
Something I find really exciting is the number of agents on the blockchain are on track to exceed the number of real users, human users on the blockchain in volume and like number of wallets and all of that. And something that makes me think about, I guess this might be a little off topic, is what happens when we have an agentic economy? How do we attract agentic customers? Is that something you've given much thought to?
Yeah, I haven't really. It'd be interesting to get both of your thoughts on it. But I think for me, I think like the main thing is the agentic economy, like you're saying, is just at the innings. And I think that for a lot of the companies having, I think we saw all yesterday, Google with their new agentic commerce protocol. I think it's called UGA, or I can't remember exactly, but I think it's very clear that people are going to build the tooling around how agents transact, how agents actually basically can decipher what to buy, what not to buy, what to transact on. I think the thing that I would see x402 is the plumbing. It's the actual, and actually, I guess a better analogy is the plumbing is the Googles and the commerce protocols, and the pipes, the actual thing that carries the water from the sink down, or the money from A to B, is x402. And I think lots of companies will obviously face that realization that, oh wait, gas fees are incredibly cheaper than interchange fees, and people want to actually transact in a space which is a little bit more fast, a little bit more fair, and cheaper overall.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And the whole pay-per-use thing is going to be huge. So, with the pay-per-call instead of subscriptions, do you believe like we're heading into a future where, how do I explain this? For example, Facebook, they operate on like a data mining model, right? Do you think the internet might switch towards being more of like a pay-per-use model where you load up a wallet, sign into Facebook, and then like drains your wallet as you use it? And now you have the option to protect your privacy.
I think it's an interesting one. I haven't really thought about it in that use case. I could see that being a potential reality. I think when it comes to the like content specifically, I think it's going to be really based on how do you empower the actual creator themselves, and how do you basically reward them for creating content, which will be interesting. But I haven't really given it much thought. But what do you guys think?
I don't know. I think you have to look at like market psychology. There's a small group of consumers that are, well, it's also part of the reason a lot of these consumers got involved in crypto, but it's a lot of consumers are becoming more and more data conscious. So I could see a subset opting into something like that. but convenience is just too high. I'm not sure everyone would want to switch to paying to use something like Facebook. I don't know. Privacy is a real issue, and data mining isn't a great thing in my opinion. So I would love to see the world go in that direction, but will it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually having a chat with a friend the other day, and we were talking about how there should be a way for basically advertisers to super incentivize you. The way that I was thinking about it was like a lot of us spend our time unconsciously scrolling. I think everyone's susceptible to a doom scroll, maybe at night or maybe in the morning or maybe in the middle of your day, depends on who you are. But I think when you do doom scroll, you're essentially not really considering and taking in all the pieces of content you're looking at. You're just consuming and scrolling because it's habitual, it's a habit. And I'm sure if you said to every single person who, spends, I'd say more than 3 hours a day on social media, hey, I will, as an advertiser, incentivize you to spend less time on here, but still have the same unit economics because you're going to give me 30 minutes of undivided attention as opposed to 3 hours of unconscious attention. And the only way that really happens is you have to use AI agents to store your context and your memory and then transact. And actually, you may be right now, the layer or the bottleneck is I might look at an ad and then I might say, okay, now I have to click through a payment. Like I have to click through the link. I have to go to their checkout page. I then have to click all the details in and then I have to check out. And that's in the modern day where we already have things like Apple Pay and other abstractions that make it easier. So I think it will be interesting to see how advertisers will use something like x402 or incentives to basically be like, hey, don't do this, but we'll incentivize you to do something else with an incentive or a reward like a micropayment.
So I met this guy a while back who had, I think he invented video advertising on like pop-ups. So like older guy, much older. He invented a new standard for advertising so you could do MOV, GIFs, that kind of thing in advertising. This was before Facebook and stuff. They did really well. Huge exit. He's retired. But I told him about this thing, and it was questing platforms, how you can put up a prize and incentivize people to come onto your platform and they'll get paid. And it's almost like monetized attention, like the way you were talking about. But something he brought up was that, and you might see this in real life, right? But what these platforms end up doing, or this model of advertising ends up doing, is only attracting the lowest quality customers. So if you're gonna, let's say, advertise a Rolex, your audience doesn't care about incentivization, so it'll never reach them. So it because of like the market psychology behind it, I don't think I could see x402 monetizing attention like that necessarily, but maybe things change. I don't know. There's also like Brave Browser already like rewarding people for their attention. Yeah, it's an interesting argument. I'd love to talk with some developers / advertisers who could more clearly showcase what could be possible, what they're already working on even. But yeah, I don't know, with like InfoFi and such, we've noticed for crypto especially, I've noticed a lot of lower quality engagement. I wonder if kind of model would do the same.
Yeah, I wonder. I think it's this kind of came from like my own personal problem where I have quite a busy schedule, but I was finding myself in my downtime actually spending quite a lot of time like unconsciously scrolling. I want to say quite a lot. I mean like 45 minutes, but for my schedule, that's probably about 20% of my free time that I get in like a day. And that was quite like worrying. I was like, oh wow. And I think if you have mechanisms to incentivize people to make the better choice, you could potentially see a world in which like, people are like, okay, I'm going to use my phone less. But actually, when I do use my phone, I'm going to be so engaged that as an advertiser, the actual, like the way that I would see it, as an advertiser, you obviously have a CAC or a cost of acquiring a customer. And like, how often do I convert as a customer? Probably very infrequently, because when I'm actually using my phone, I'm like half using my phone, half eating, half watching something on TV. Like I'm pretty much not even focusing. And if an advertiser said to me, hey, You give us this 30 minutes and then we'll reap the same reward from you, and we'll incentivize you to do something better with your time. I'd very happily take that deal.
Interesting. Yeah, as an advertiser, I think acquiring your your persona or target audience, someone who's productive and such, is like your persona would probably have a higher customer acquisition cost. So being able to tap into that and listening how that would benefit you is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. I think they'll explore that frontier very soon. If not, I'm sure there's people already working on it.
Now, you're talking about there's probably people already working on it. What's the coolest thing you've seen already being built or in progress, or something like alpha you've heard about? What's happening behind the scenes with X402?
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting things that I can share is some of the stuff that I saw specifically at the hackathon. Not a lot of it is public, but like a lot of what people built was super, super interesting. I can walk you through some of the examples that won, and then some of the ones that I thought were just quite funny. I think to begin with, a funny one that I saw was there was a team of 3, I think they were Berkeley students, super young, like 18, 19. And what they had built was basically a way to connect your Meta glasses to X402. So anytime you actually shook someone's hand and agreed on a price, that would then send the actual X402 payment header to transact with that person. They obviously had the classic question like, how do you prove a personhood and how do all these things? And they're like, we have to add the person as a friend, and then there's facial recognition software that works and whatnot. I bet it was super funny that they did a demo and the guy was like, I'll pay you $5 if you can do a backflip or something. And obviously he couldn't do it. They shook hands and the other guy got £5. And it's actually interesting. Like, obviously it's very gimmicky, but it could be interesting to see something like a prediction market happening in real life where I'm like, Cameron, I think that Trump's going to do something crazy. And then we shake hands on it. And then we don't have to talk about it again. It's just executed through both that agent paying one another. Those agents are already being deployed en masse into Calfee and Polymarket. So why not just add an additional layer of payments onto them?
It's so funny.
That's
I love
crazy.
Love it. Yeah, that one's really funny. A really cool one that actually comes up to, I think, like a lot of the topics that are very interesting with X402, and the one that actually won one of the prizes was, they called it the Agentic Credit Bureau, but essentially where they were enabling AI agent to get credit so that they could actually ensure that they could do longer chains of work. If you're an AI agent and you have to do a 16-step process, and within that 16-step process, you have to do 2 paid API calls. Now, as someone who's building that agent, you could either build several agents that hand off one another, or you could even do the opposite, which is you build one agent that does the entire workflow, has all the context, and basically does it end to end. And the interesting thing that they built was like, instead of having these cash flow like rubs against one another, where like you might be short, you might not have the money in the wallet, you could essentially get an intraday credit or intraday loan from somewhere like an Aave or a Morpho, and then pay that loan for whatever thing you needed to pay, or pay it forward to borrow money so that you had money in your wallet to do whatever you need. And that was super interesting. They got an MCP live within the day, so 8 hours of building. And they also built like a credit scoring algo. So that was something that I could really see working, because if you do have an agent that's doing multiple steps that requires multiple payments and it doesn't have enough money, then the most capital efficient way to do that is with loans. So that was a really interesting one that I saw.
when you said this integrated into Aave and things like that. Just one thing to clarify, and I had no idea, is X402 only available on Sol, ETH, BNB? Is it a cross-chain type of thing? Is it just like connecting wallet to wallet? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things that I think people probably confuse about X402, which is one of its like kind of superpowers, is that lots of people think that because X402 is very closely allied or created by Coinbase, it's only going to be available on Base. But actually, X402 is completely cross-chain and can be on any chain. I think right now it's supported on Sol, ETH, Base, and I think that's it. But yeah, it's one of its superpowers in the sense that because it's a web protocol and it's not a blockchain native, let's call it, and it's actually just enabling blockchain to be used. You can use it cross-chain. I think it's probably one of the first examples of successful interoperability. Before I used to work at Galaxy, I used to work at a place called Bitpanda, and one of their biggest projects was actually trying to build interoperability and build the first interoperable protocol. It never ended up working, and I don't think we've solved for it, even in the crypto space. So interesting that something like this has been able to do that.
Yeah, very interesting, actually. You're just talking about how they're trying to build this new thing. And I was just curious, what would you recommend for founders or developers or whoever? How do you suggest people get started with X402 and integrate it? Because, yeah, I think it's really important that people start paying attention to this. I think it's going to change the game.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a fun way that you could do it, obviously, everyone these days is hype coding. Every single VC on Twitter does a shut up about cold code, which is fine. I get it. It is pretty cool. I do use it a lot. There's a limit to which I can take. But anyway, that aside, I think it could be interesting if you are vibe coding an app for it to be supporting X402 payments, like specifically supported with microtransactions. So maybe a lot of these vibe coded apps, which are super like fun to use, are like workout trackers or like something like cal.ai where, you're scanning your food and you're getting your calories back. It would be very interesting to see how their usage went up, down, the revenue, cash flow based on microtransactions as opposed to subscriptions. Obviously, the thing that I think businesses are wary of, but I think they, probably underestimate is they have this fallacy where if you have a subscription, you're going to underuse your subscription. For a company, it's going to cost less actually than they net from you, which is fair enough. But I think when it comes to pay per call or pay per use or pay per outcome, I think we find that people are actually getting more value out of it and therefore are more sticky. They stay with that platform for longer if they believe that the value that they're deriving from the standard cost or from that standard microtransaction is higher than paying $5 a month. And I think that's something that obviously a lot of these vibe coded apps struggle with, but a lot of people jump ship every time there's a new one or the cheaper one or something else. I think that could be a fun way to do it. I think another way to do it is you could pay for an API call using X402. You could use a lot of I forget the name of the company, but there was a company that uses tool calls, and the tool calls you can pay for with X402 now, and it is the biggest tool call company. Can't remember its name, but I'll look it up whilst we're on.
Sorry, what was that company called?
I'm looking it up because I cannot remember to save my life, but it was one that was very big without, that's not crypto native, but it was using X402 as, Firecrawl. Sorry, that is it. It's a web scraping API, and basically lots of people use it to scrape the web for all sorts of stuff. And they actually integrated X402 the other day, and it's super interesting because lots of people of all sizes use Firecrawl. So if you're ever looking to scrape a website, use Firecrawl and then pay for the thing in X402 or using your X402 would be very interesting.
Do you think they're probably one of the biggest businesses to integrate X402 today?
I would say when obviously we have the classic Cloudflare, but it's obviously a very different use case. But I guess with Cloudflare, you probably need to be set up and understand what Cloudflare is doing. And most of their customers are enterprise customers. I think something like the Firecrawl is probably the biggest and most accessible one in terms of for a general audience. Obviously, one that is pretty close to everyone in the industry is ThirdWeb. I think people who are using anything on chain and specifically are using an API, ThirdWeb is very cool for that. Also, big shout out to the Locust guys and the team. What they're building is really, really cool. If you're ever looking to basically send money with the agentic element abstracted and like using X402 as your underlying, and you don't want to deal with like wallet and sub accounts and all these things, then that's a good way to do it.
Have you built anything yourself with X402?
I actually have not built anything to date with X402, but I'm actually currently working on something which requires web scraping, and I did use Firecrawl, and I did pay for it with x402. I was thinking the other day building a facilitator could be pretty cool, but I'm not like a dev entirely myself. I'm a product person, and using the God sent code, I am going to try to build a facilitator in the next few days. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think that's key, right? On being of yourself working on the product side at doing something which you plan to do is actually really smart because it gives you a greater understanding as to the mechanics behind it, and also leaning on the product side, which is your game. You can, I'm sure, build something really cool, even though you're not a full stack techie.
100%. That's, I guess, the beauty and the beast of vibe coding, right? Is that part of it is people love the fact that you can build stuff, but it makes it super easy to, and therefore knowing, what to build or why you are building it, or all the things that are around just pumping out code is super important. Yeah.
Incredible. Cam, is there anything else you want to go over? I think I've pretty much asked everything I was interested in or so far know about that. If there's anything else you also want to share or any gaps we missed, please bring it up as well.
Yeah, I think we covered the most essential things. I think one thing people should look out for and not confuse, because I think it is very commonly confused, is like you think of x402 as the pipe and the agentic commerce protocols from whether that be OpenAI, Stripe, from Google. That's actually the plumbing, and that's something super important to remember because x402 can be interchanged. It's not like you have to use one commerce protocol over another. It is an open standard. It's built so that people can build upon it as opposed to it being built for a specific use case. I think that's the main thing. I think something cool to watch out for in the next coming weeks is obviously MetaMask came out the other day talking about doing more with x402. Galaxy Research actually just released their x402 research on the 7th of January, so last week. So I think it's becoming a little bit more easy to understand that people want AI agents to transact. I think the thing that we need to give people is the assurance that if you are doing agentic commerce or agentic payments, that x402 gives you the maximal amount of flexibility, and starting there is always better than starting with a closed infrastructure loop where you can't go back from that design decision. So yeah, I think that would be my 2 cents.
Sorry, I was muted. Cam, is there anything else you'd like to add or ask?
No, Ved, I think you've covered all the central points, which I, from a personal perspective, was looking to get more information on. It's opened my eyes hugely. I've done my research ahead of this space, but the way that you've explained it has been fantastic. I think it's a really exciting new stage in the world of agentics, payments, and the blockchain. And I'm really inspired by it, man. I think it's really cool. You're definitely in the perfect space. I think we're going to see a lot of growth this year.
Yeah, I think it'll be super interesting. I hope a big player. I think my 2026 prediction is Coinbase somehow using their power will convince someone like an OpenAI to actually enable this, because I think a very common use case for something like x402, you want to access an article from a Financial Times, which I obviously use every day, but is behind a paywall. And some people really don't want to spend that $80, but they may really be interested in that one article. So I think my prediction and somewhat my hope is 2 players like an OpenAI or even an Anthropic come together with someone else like a Washington Post, New York Times, something that is very commonly used to unlock the power of a microtransaction in this form.
I love it. Fed, thank you so much for coming on. I just want to give one more opportunity here, but this time, Fed, if you just want to plug in where people can find you, what you're doing, anything you want to share about yourself, please do.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you guys for having me on. It is actually been a pleasure. I love always nerding out about all things crypto, but specifically agentic payment stuff is always really fun for me. So appreciate you having me on. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter, which is at Tech by Ved. Same thing on Instagram, same thing on TikTok. I also have a podcast, which is interviewing deep tech operators and founders called Think at the Table. And if you are ever interested in agentic payments, just shoot me a DM and I'll always get back with whatever I can share. Or anything AI and crypto related or adjacent. And again, thank you guys for having me on. It's genuinely been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much. We'll chat soon, everybody. Closing the room now.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.